Dear learners, I am Christina Georgy, your academic counselor for the course code BEGAE-182 titled English Communication Skills. Today we'll discuss reading skills. Remember, this is part 2 of what we already discussed on reading skills. In our previous session, we discussed the various reasons for reading and also the characteristics of reading. Today, we will focus our attention towards the reading process, the various strategies used by good readers, and most importantly, the levels of meanings along with some reading problems. So, as we discussed, reading has been recognized to be one of the primary skills to be mastered in a language. Do you remember the LSRW skills that we discussed in our previous session? LSRW. What does that mean? L for listening, correct? S for speaking, yes. R for reading, yes. And W for writing, correct. I'm so glad to see all those correct answers. LSRW skills. These are the basic skill set that is needed for any individual to communicate effectively in English language. Today we have focused our attention towards reading skill. So if we look at the process of reading, we can see that at times we read for meaning and at times we do read aloud as well, right? So in considering the reading process, first we have to distinguish between two separate activities. Which are they? Silent reading and loud reading. So we can say reading for meaning or silent reading and reading aloud or loud reading. So, firstly, let's discuss reading aloud. Can you tell me a situation where you will be reading aloud? Firstly, let's consider the case of kids. When you were a kid, weren't you asked to stand up in class and read aloud? May that be a portion from the textbook, may that be history lesson or any other class. Certain stories. Yes, Shinsia, you're also right. Okay, kids are very often asked to read aloud. Why is that so? That is because for the kids that would help them to have better understanding of what they are reading. That is, for early readers, reading aloud is an important aid that will help them to discover how reading is associated with the spoken words they have already learned to use. This is more applicable to learning English as a second language. In that particular context, the early learners would be asked to read aloud. That would also help us to monitor the pronunciation of specific words. So, reading aloud, as I mentioned, is a common activity in classroom learning. So, is there another situation where we read aloud apart from in a classroom situation? Can you tell me another situation in which a person may read aloud? For example, suppose Annie is a member of the drama club. So is Grishma. So, don't you think at times they will be asked to read aloud? Because if they are practicing a script based on a drama for that matter, they might be asked to read aloud. Another situation might be if you are actresses or actors, then you might be expected to read the script aloud. Yes, that is another situation. So the purpose of reading aloud is not just to understand a text, but also to convey the information to someone else who has no access to it. This is the scenario in which you read stories to your kids. Most of our kids won't be able to read the stories themselves. That could be because of their age, or that could be because of their attention deficit, or may that be any kind of reason. At times we read out stories to our kids. Suppose if we are with our grandparents or some elderly people in our family, then we might have to read out parts of a newspaper article to them. Have you ever had such a experience? You must have had such an experience, right? Yes, especially when you are kids or when you are young, you might be asked to read out pieces of news, to your elder ones. Yes. So reading aloud involves looking at a text, understanding it, and also saying it. So let me ask you, which one is more easier, silent reading or reading aloud? Which one do you practice? It's correct. Most of you would be practicing silent reading. Silent reading is the more acceptable type of reading, and we can say that reading aloud is much more difficult than silent reading. The reason is that while reading aloud, our attention is divided between two activities, which are they? Reading and speaking. And very often we stumble and make mistakes when reading aloud in our own language, and just suppose reading aloud in another language, say foreign language, would be more difficult and troublesome. Now let's move on to reading for meaning. See, we already discussed reading aloud, right? So reading for meaning or silent reading is the activity that we normally engage in. Suppose we are reading a newspaper or a poster or maybe a road sign. Will we actually read aloud? No. Almost everybody will be doing silent reading for that matter. It is what you are doing as you read this unit. Most of you, while listening to the lecture, might be looking at the text also. So that also becomes part of silent reading. It involves looking at sentences in a text and understanding the message they convey. In other words, making sense of a written text. So it does not normally involve saying the words we read, not even silently inside our heads. So when we read for meaning, we do not need to read every letter of every word. That is one thing that you need to remember. Why is that so? This is because we can guess much of what is said as we read it, provided the text makes sense. For example, if you are in the habit of reading some short stories or novels for that matter, once you reach the middle of the story, you will be having some idea regarding, this would be the possible climax, or you will be having an idea about what is going to happen, right? So reading, as you know, is an active process. Reading is an active process. We do not merely sit as passive receivers of the text, but we draw on our own knowledge of the world and of the language to help us guess what the text will say. So, this is where the communication process comes into action. In Unit 1, we have studied the process of communication. I have also given you the study material with the text. I have explained using the text the aspects of process of communication. I suppose you have looked into that. So there as part of figure 1, you can see the picture on page number 10 of your study material. Here the process of communication is explained in this aspect, that is, the encoder has a message in his mind which he wants to communicate. In order to make this communication possible, what should he do? He must put whatever he has to say into words, that is, he must encode it. What happens once he has encoded? Remember, encoding can be done in written or spoken form. So once it is encoded, it becomes available as a text to any other person whosoever reads or hears it. So the person who decodes, that is the person who hears or reads this message, is the decoder. Once it is decoded, the message enters the mind of the decoder and it is understood. So we can say that communication has been achieved. But what you should think is that Does this model explain the communication process satisfactorily? That is, we studied that there are too many barriers. Things can go wrong at any stage in the process. Especially the decoder plays a pivotal role in the communication process. Hence, we cannot be sure that this person, the decoder, has received the message as it was intended by the encoder. The decoder may not have understood the language and style in which the message has been encoded. That is a probability. Another probability is that the encoder may not have encoded his or her message properly. Alright, so one thing is clear from this model. That is, it assumes that reading means getting out of the text as nearly as possible the message that writer puts into it. Whatever the message may be, reading is a process through which we get to have the message. Understood? So according to this view, the text is full of meaning conveyed through words. The meanings can be absorbed by reader's mind like a sponge absorbs water. To put it in another way, the reader's mind is an empty vessel into which the text pours ideas, facts, etc. Or it is like a blank slate onto which the text imprints the words, the ideas, etc. The writer has done all that is required for understanding his or her message, and the reader need not make any effort, but has only to let his or her mind absorb it passively. So the reader need to let his or her mind absorb this piece of information passively. The reader's role is thus seen to be a passive one. So problems arise when there is a mismatch between the presuppositions of the writer and those of the reader. So there comes the importance of the area of shared assumptions as if given in figure number 2. So figure number 2 deals with presupposition and communication. So this figure shows how two people can have certain things in common. The shaded area where the two circles overlap. So the shaded area is the area of common interest or shared assumptions. Alright, so you must have studied Venn diagram during your school days, right? So this is more or less reminiscent of those things. So when a writer and the reader have shared interest and beliefs, so that might be the area of shared assumptions. For example, if suppose I am a fan of Harry Potter, and I am writing an article on Harry Potter, and in our last class we discussed the importance of knowing the learner, I mean the reader level, reader's interests, etc. Remember? Yes. Suppose I am writing this article on Harry Potter for the Potterheads, that is the fans of Harry Potter. Then remember, I am a fan myself and the readers are also fans of Harry Potter. So both of us have a shared interest. What is the shared interest? Our interest for Harry Potter. So these people will understand whatever I am writing in this essay better than any other person reading my article. So the figure shows how two people can have certain things in common. The shaded area where the two circles overlap, that is the area of shared assumptions. So this area includes all the knowledge that they share, including knowledge of language. It also includes attitudes, beliefs, values and assumptions that they share. The unshaded areas represent experiences that are unique to each individual. So the experiences shared by Priyanka won't be the same as Rupika, right? So this depends on person to person, and the unshaded area would remain more or less unique in nature. So it is clear that the greater the size of the shaded area, the easier the communication. If the writer and the reader are from closely similar backgrounds with similar attitudes, beliefs and assumptions, the reader can interpret the text with apparently no conscious effort. This is, however, the danger that a careless reader may assume that the extent of the shaded area is bigger than it actually is. So is that clear so far? What about the others? Now let's discuss the various strategies used by good readers. Good readers interact with the text that they read. They form personal expectations about what they want to get out of the text. They create meaning by constructing or generating relationships between what they read and what they already know. Prior knowledge would also play a pivotal role here. That is the relationship between what they read and what they already know create meaning. So in generating these meanings, they draw on their prior knowledge as we discussed. The prior knowledge of and beliefs about the subject. Readers have networks of prior understanding about a topic. So this is what theorists call schemata. So schemata is a very common question that appears for TEEs. What is schemata? That is the question. So in reading, they add to those networks, filling in some of the gaps with what they know or in their existing schemata. It's simply that the networks of prior understanding about a topic. Alright, that is the schemata. If you look at figure 3, it shows the relationships among prior knowledge, a text and the meanings a reader construct in order to or in relation to the text. So schemata are knowledge structures which represent a generalized knowledge about objects or events or even about a language system which are activated while processing a text. To remember an important function of schemata, that is to help readers to match what they know with what the written text tells them. An important function of schemata is to help readers to match what they know with what the written text tells them.